Good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to this Vision Committee meeting of March 20th, 2024. The time is 5 p.m. and this is the right place. And with that, could we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Dennehy, absent. Councilmember Maloney.
Here.
Councilmember Schmischer.
Here.
Councilmember Stein, absent. Councilmember Tracy.
Here.
Councilmember Worthington.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
Here.
Mayor Troutman, absent.
Thank you for that. A little bit about what we're process tonight. What we'll probably do is have a presentation from staff and the police department and perhaps some discussion. We'll open it up for public comment. Looking at the requests that I've got, I realize there's a few of you who have not requested. And so if you would like to request, there's a form right over there to fill out to speak. But it's great to see everyone here. It makes, I believe myself, that it makes for better government the more interaction we have with the citizens about things that they're concerned about, because that's what we're here to do, is to listen to your concerns and see if there's some way that we can react to them. And with that, I'll turn it over to our city administrator, Mr. Stevens.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick, members of council. We are here tonight. We had a citizen request to speak. Mr. Tony came several meetings ago to bring up this particular topic, so we've put it on the discussion. We don't have any proposed language for city council. We foresee this as more of a discussion, talk about what we have on the books right now, how many noise complaints we receive, and then discussion moving forward on trying to seek direction on what council would like staff to do. And I believe, as you mentioned earlier, getting some input from the community so we have a better understanding of what the community wants. With that, I'm going to turn it over to the police department. We have Commander John Sabatino with us, who's our law enforcement commander, and Sterling Jenkins, who is our crime analyst, to talk about what the PD has put together.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick, City Administrator Stevens, members of council, thanks for having us tonight and listening to us. Everybody in the gallery, thank you for coming here. And like it was mentioned, we wouldn't be able to accomplish a lot of things without your participation. So I'm very surprised to see this much involvement, and thanks for being here. I've got a lot of or some statute stuff to talk about and some application process things to talk about in reference to CDOT and signage. So it might be better, if it's okay with you folks, if maybe we hear from members in the gallery first about some complaints, and then we can follow that up with Sterling Jenkins and some statistics, and then I can get into kind of the logistics for application processes for signage and statutes and ordinances and that sort of thing, if that sounds okay.
I would ask if you could perhaps do the statistics presentation first. It may give us a context or a framing for the information and opinions we'll hear tonight. And so if we could we start with that? Then we'll switch to the audience and wind up with yourself. How's that sound?
Absolutely. Sounds good. Thank you.
Good evening. I'd like to start first with some methods. Is that better? You can probably hear me better now. So I talked with Chief Schick this month, and he had mentioned looking into noise and traffic problems that maybe we had received through our dispatch system. So when I first look at any kind of variables, the first thing I look at is our CAD system, and that's our computer-aided dispatch system. Every call that comes into the police department goes through the CAD system, or any other call that officers are also initiating. So it's a way to track not only calls for service, but call volume. And when I look at those parameters, I pull data for whatever the request is. When I first looked at this, I started looking at noises first and then traffic complaints. Now, CAD is a very specific system. You have to put in the exact right word in order to pull the information. So initially I had pulled reports for traffic complaints. We received 475 traffic complaints from January 1st, 2023 until March 20th. I pulled some statistics today. March 20th of 2024. I've looked so far at days and times of the complaints. I haven't mapped the complaints just yet, but I do have some numbers regarding Highway 50. So again, that's how the data is pulled. In order to actually look for Jake breaks, it was important that I looked through each of the CAD cards, CAD incidents, and actually looked for the word Jake break. So that was fairly time intensive. And so I reviewed all those documents throughout the last couple of days. Keep in mind the numbers found in the report did not necessarily reflect the number of incidents that have occurred. I found out earlier today that sometimes citizens actually call City Hall to talk about Jake breaks and other noise complaints, and so police don't have those records. So I just wanted to make sure that you knew that my specific data today is pulled from the CAD system. We don't know if something happens unless it's called to us or unless police officers actually observe it happening. So that's how I pulled the data again. So 475 traffic complaints. Our most busiest times are at the beginning of the week, actually Tuesdays and Wednesdays. And I have a number of statistics here which I can make available to you. I know you have a hard copy, but I can also send you an electronic copy as well. The busiest time of days are actually from 3 o'clock p.m. till about 6 o'clock p.m. also. Now, looking at noise complaints, there were 141 noise complaints. Now, keep in mind, when we look at noise complaints, or if we look at traffic complaints, that encompasses a lot of things. Sometimes someone may throw something out of a car window, littering. It may come in through dispatch as a traffic complaint because there's a vehicle involved. Noise complaints oftentimes are vehicle complaints, people's music being too loud, all kinds of different things are filtered in, but they all are encompassed within that terminology, within those perimeters. After looking at that entire raw data of 616 cases, I didn't find any specifics regarding Jake breaks or the use of the term Jake break. That doesn't mean that someone didn't call to report a Jake break. They could have said something as if a truck was coming through town and it was loud, and that's what that card says. So it doesn't specifically say Jake break. So far in this analysis, I haven't found the specific word Jake breaks. That doesn't mean that it doesn't exist within the reports. It also doesn't mean that it hasn't been called in another service. My responsibility and my area of responsibility is with Canyon City Police Department, so I'm looking at only numbers in that jurisdiction. Our jurisdiction is, we have a map, I believe, in this hall, and you can also find one online. Our jurisdiction is almost like a puzzle piece. So there's certain places in town that may look as if it's Canyon City, but it's actually Fremont County. So a lot of the times with the Jake breaks, what we're looking at is they may just barely be in our jurisdiction, or they may be in Fremont County Sheriff's Office jurisdiction, just because of our boundaries and the way those boundaries look. When I look specifically at Royal Gorge Boulevard, I located 139 specific cases for Highway 50, and I still did not find anything regarding Jake break specifically. But that is our highest traffic complaint is Highway 50. A lot of times our noise complaints are around parks and schools, obviously. That's another place where people gather, and sometimes it can become louder. But again, what I'm finding is not the specific word of Jake break, which I was looking at through those specific reports. But we do have, again, 616 complaints regarding noise and traffic. That's a significant number for our police to respond to. Oftentimes, keep in mind, by the time you're able to respond to a call for service on a noise complaint or a traffic complaint, the event is already over. But at least people are taking the initiative to call that in. What I would encourage people to do is when you do call dispatch to make any kind of a report, use specific language. Dispatchers will kind of guide you through what they're looking for, but if it is something regarding noise, specifically what that noise is, what you may interpret that noise to be, that helps us track that data and really put a finer point on what we're looking at. So again, the descriptive analysis that I've done here is mostly a description of raw data. A formal analysis I'll be continuing with as far as spatial data and temporal data, as far as times of day, even further, and specific locations on the highway or the parks. And again, if you want something more specific after looking through this report, you can email me or put in a request with the Canyon City Police Department, and I can look further into it.
Thank you. Any questions or comments at this point from council? Yes. Sure.
I'm sorry.
Microphone?
I'm sorry that I came in late, and maybe you mentioned this before I got here. And I'm totally I know I've heard of the Jake brake problem with semis, but what about people who deliberately enhance their cars so that when they're pulling in or pulling out, they sound like a jet engine landing and taking off? Is there anything in our ordinance, or do you ever get reports on that?
We do, loud vehicles.
Yes.
Usually it just comes in as a traffic complaint or a noise complaint with a loud vehicle. Oftentimes it's not specified being a muffler or something like that. It could be a stereo, it could be a number of things, but definitely we do get calls for service regarding mufflers and vehicles that are loud, such as dirt bikes, motorcycles also. We'll get complaints on those.
So on a car, is that some kind of add-on for a muffler that makes that sound?
It could be an add-on, and it could also be a dysfunctional muffler or a missing muffler even. So there's a number of reasons why that car may be loud. Officer Sabatino, or Commander, do you have any?
I can't rattle off the exact state statute for modified exhaust, but it is technically illegal to modify exhaust in any manner other than what came from the factory.
Okay. I do get a number of complaints in my neighborhood on the northwest side of town that there are a considerable number of individuals who have modified trucks and cars so that they make those sounds. And it's, but most people don't call the police department because by the time we do, they're gone.
Sure.
And a lot of people's feeling is that, the police department has more important things to worry about. But it just goes on and on and on. And I don't know whether that'd be part of what we would put in an ordinance or not. Thank you.
Thank you.
Council
And I'd like
members?
to, sorry,
Please go
I'd
ahead.
like to add on to that for everybody listening that even though you may think that we have bigger things going on, unless we know that it's an issue, we definitely can't do anything to help solve it. So don't be afraid to call in and let us know and give as much information as possible. That way, we're able to hopefully find the vehicle and identify the driver and deal with that situation accordingly.
Thank you.
Councilmember Schmischer.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. First off, just echoing Councilmember Stein's remarks, I certainly hear a lot of complaints about those things as well. Modified cars, trucks, and even motorcycles as being really a nuisance around town, and including in people's residences or people who are enjoying sitting on Main Street and just trying to enjoy our downtown. So I do think that that's a problem that's worth having a conversation about tonight in addition to Jake brakes. I had a couple of questions. Thank you so much for that presentation and for pulling all of this data. It's really, really helpful to kind of know what it is that we're talking about. I was wondering, did you also pull the data from SeeClickFix? I don't know if folks are more likely to report these sorts of things there. From SeeClickFix, I'm not sure if folks are more likely to report these sorts of issues through that medium as well.
I have not looked into that source specifically. I've only looked into our dispatch system.
Okay. That might be worth checking to see if that has any other information on it. And then I was also wondering regarding the 141 noise complaints, were you able to tell if those are noise complaints specific to vehicles, or is that just noise complaints in general, like somebody could be having a party?
Most of the time, it's actually either a loud stereo or people being loud outside of a public area.
Okay, so it's
the
not
vehicles-
necessarily related to a vehicle.
No, but I thought it was important to look at that to make sure how it was coded, so we could maybe get some more information from that. Most of what I saw was coming through as actually like traffic complaint. I just added the noise complaints also to see if I could get more detailed information with that.
Absolutely. And I think that makes a lot of sense because on the one hand, like we have a very specific topic to talk about in terms of Jake brakes, but then when we're talking about noise, vehicles are only one possible source of the issue. So it's really helpful to have that bigger picture.
Sure.
So thanks again.
And it could be coded also as a suspicious activity. So that's something I have not looked into yet, but the different codings, just because something's coded a certain way doesn't mean it's a clean form of data, right? It depends on what the reporting party has said and how the dispatch codes it. So again, there could be some in suspicious activity as well, because it may be noise brought the attention of the reporting party to call, but then it turned into something else where they think there may have been drugs involved or fights or something else. And so again, although the perimeter is clean, the information inside of it is more broad.
Thank you.
The one thing I'd like to suggest having been involved in data presentation throughout my career, when you have graphs and you have like a count for your vertical axis, it's generally a good idea to normalize those so that your highest count, that graph range, that scale range, is carried throughout all the graphs. The issue is, I know that you can lose resolution sometimes doing that when you have data that is at the lower end of the graph. But what you can do then is present a second graph that expands that scale or actually shrinks the scales so you get better resolution in your data. But it really helps to have it apples to apples, so when you go through the graphs, you can look and say, and not have to do so much interpolating.
Yes, thank you.
Sure. So with that, why don't we turn to our audience? I've got a lot of requests to speak up here. We'll just go through them as I receive them, and just when you come up, just tell us who you are and where you live, and then proceed. Valerie Foss.
Hello, again, I'm Valerie Foss, and my brother owns a property on Tunnel Drive, and he's had that property for about 15 years now, I think. And he's living in Mexico, and I am living at his property now. And when I moved in, the trucks about, let's say 5-10 years ago were doable. I mean, they would come every once in a while, and it was a pain, but you got over it. But now it's a whole different story. I'm right at the base, and I have been woken up at 3 in the morning, and I look at the clock, and I cannot believe it. I'm like, 3? There's trucks going down. And then this morning, I was woken up at 6, and I started timing them to see one truck, and then I would count how many seconds for the second truck. And it would be 30 seconds to 60 seconds before the second one came, third one, fourth one, whoops, fifth one. And I'm like, this is crazy. I mean, and some of the trucks even going up now, it's not necessarily the Jake brakes. Going up the hill, they're making like bop, 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 noise. And it's just, it's really kind of affected, my life there, especially like being outside during the day. It's all day long, all day. One after another, it's like a train. So I don't know. I think that's not what I've known Tunnel Drive to be in the past. And I think it might affect the animals, it affects me, it affects, everyone I know in our neighborhood. So that's it.
Thank you. Next, we have Brenda Haley.
Hi, I'm Brenda Haley, and I live on Tunnel Drive, and I've been there 33 years, and I train horses. I teach a lot of lessons. I have people come over for instruction, and all of a sudden the truck noise coming down will totally not be able to talk. I've had a UPS driver come in and think there was a plane landing. It's like, what the heck is that? But it's something, I know we can't do away with the quarry, but there's an easy solution. There's a win-win situation, because I would say about 1/3 of the traffic coming down doesn't make any noise whatsoever. And I've called a couple of the companies, and they said their drivers don't use the Jake brakes, that they don't feel like it's necessary. And if somebody does want to use the Jake brakes, they have these things called silencers now that they can install in their trucks, and they can be totally silent. And I know that if they had the silencers going through town, they would be quiet. And I also wanted to bring up the train, because the train, everyone loves the train, but do they have to blast all the time. You'll be sitting downtown and all of a sudden for like a minute you can't hear anybody, and they pull into the back of our houses on Tunnel Drive, and it's sporadic. It's like whoever's driving the train. Some of them just go right on through, and they don't blast until they get out of city limits. But there are other drivers that just sit there and blast their horn for the thrill of the passengers, and I just feel like that's so rude. So if they could have a policy, maybe in their training, to tell their drivers to have some respect for us, it would be really great.
I have a little knowledge there that may help. Trains by federal rules are required to play "Here Comes the Bride" as they approach an intersection
But that's
a
only
street.
if somebody's coming from the only way, and there never is. The only other train on that track is Rock and Rail, and they have been totally respectful. We never hear a peep out of them. And they're on different hours. So there's
Sure.
no reason for them to really do it.
Sure. I understand, and I understand your point.
Yeah.
That was just giving you a little context for there are some requirements.
And
And,
that's-
if different engineers are doing different things, that's certainly
Right.
something that
Yeah,
we
they
can-
should have a consistent policy, because some of them just like to go out there and do what they want. They used to stop there and talk about history and stuff, but they're interrupting our lives, right behind our houses,
Okay,
okay?
thank you. Next, we have Fred Toney.
Thanks for having us here. Again, I'm Fred Toney. I live at 71 Sunrise Mesa Drive, and tremendous respect for our police here. I mean, they're fantastic. Every time I say they're very professional. I'd like to be a policeman. If I was better looking, stronger, and, I'd like to do it. But thank you very much. One thing, having that respect, I'm like some of our council members. I don't want to be, and I don't expect anyone else to be calling the police every time they hear a Jake break in town. I want them to work on more important things. And noise, I don't want them to spend all their time on noise. And so I'll go. I had a 32-page presentation, but I got it down to 4 or so. And I think you all have copies. We've sent it out ahead of time. But it starts with the state of Colorado law on compression braking devices. Title 42-4-25, code now requires that any vehicle equipped with engine compression brake devices, commonly referred to as a Jake brake, be equipped with proper mufflers. Failure to do so will be a result in a fine of $500. Enforcement of the law is the responsibility of the local authorities. That's an easy one. You put a sign up at the city limits, come in, they use a Jake brake. I got some examples. They'll come all the way through town, not just coming down Tunnel Drive on the hill. Every stoplight, they're using their Jake brakes. Every stoplight. In less than 10 minutes the other morning, I took time to count some trucks, 36 trucks. Over 30 of them use their Jake brakes coming through town, all the way through. I can hear them early in the morning, and I know where they're at, coming all the way through town. No reason for it, absolutely no, unless they're driving unsafely. So most of those are rock and gravel haulers. And not to stereotype, but a lot of those guys are a little bit of rebels. They got the Ben-Hur spikes on the front steering wheels. But a Jake brake is an unmuffled engine compression brake. Is a motor vehicle brake which is activated or worked by the compression of the engine of a motor vehicle. Noise levels can exceed 90 decibels. 90 decibels, where 65 is generally considered a safe noise level. It is unsafe to use them on slippery roads as well. It's dangerous. And to your point, in this same title in the Colorado, when you modify your mufflers, like you see that 1992 Honda Civic with straight pipes on it, sound like he's going 70, but he's going 20. Those guys, they get the same ticket, according to Colorado law. So it can be enforced. But I want to make this short and sweet, so I'm going to go through the summary. This beautification project of the medians here is created to draw in tourism, help businesses, but without a sound ordinance, this is for our mayor, it's like putting mud flaps on a Corvette. So the use of compression brakes, Jake brakes, creates noise which are unreasonably disturb the public. Outside gatherings, dinings, walking would be much more pleasurable without having to shout over the multitude of trucks coming through our town using their Jake brakes and causing unnecessary noise. They have brakes. They don't need to use their Jake brakes in towns. Many towns in Colorado, not including Canyon City, have ordinances against using Jake brakes. Kansas City has even a more urgent need than these other towns for the ordinance due to the sheer number of 18-wheelers coming through town. Adding this ordinance would allow additional advantages for tourism. Our businesses, trying to sit outside mugs and have a cup of coffee, you can't hear anybody talk right next to you. Downtown, you can hear the Jake brakes. So sitting outside sometime is, it's not very pleasurable. The adoption of a city ordinance with signs that the city limits would further the public health, safety, welfare, and businesses of Canyon City. So, does anybody have any questions? And as far as reporting, I'm sure we can get your ratio up on the reporting of Jake brakes, but why would we do that, right? Don't want to do that. And it's not just Jake brakes, like you said. You can follow that 1992 Honda Civic all the way up through town, almost to Love's.
I can almost guarantee you he pulls into the high school parking lot also.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, Councilmember Tracy.
Thanks. Thanks for what we've heard so far from audience members and Mr. Tony. Also appreciate you bringing this issue forward. Some here know that I brought it up probably multiple times in the last couple of years. It's just, to me, it's the Jake brake issue specifically is one that I think we can solve. And as you said, Mr. Tony, I've noticed it too over and over that many of them use these brakes through town, and there's no need for that. If they're using their equipment properly and using their brakes properly, they don't need to make that noise. But even if you're over on Main Street, you hear this, or even here, just outside the building here. So I really think that this is what we need to do, and I don't know how many towns, but I know a number of towns and cities in Colorado have an ordinance prohibiting the use of Jake brakes. Little towns have it. Maybe it's just a 2-lane highway that goes through their town, but they prohibit the use of the brakes in their town limits, and I just really don't know why we can't do that. Now, what we need to look at, and maybe staff can help us with that, and the police department, just what we need to do about the specific circumstance there for Tunnel Drive. Since it's trucks coming down from a quarry, I don't know, I think what I've heard indirectly is that there may be safety issues, that some have said that they need to use those brakes, the Jake brakes, for safety coming down the hill loaded up from the quarry. I am not in a position personally to evaluate whether that's accurate or not, but I think we've got to address this noise issue in one way or another. I know we've talked in the past about noise in general and how if we have a noise ordinance with specific limits in it, then we have to pay for the cost of enforcing that. And, we struggle to keep our police department fully staffed as it is and doing what they already do so well. So that's another little piece to keep in mind, but I'm glad we're having this discussion.
Thank you for that.
John? Let me follow up really quick.
Please.
Are there any CDL license holders in the audience right now? No? Okay, so I talked to a good friend of mine who said there's zero reason to use these Jake brakes in town. So there's just zero reason. He said, put a sign up over here, put a sign up over here, put a $500 fine on the sign, and call it a day. However, coming down hills, he did say it is a safety issue for a lot of these full loads. And I understand there's mufflers for them as well. But that's up to the trucking company to provide those for the drivers. But I 100% agree there is zero reason to use these Jake brakes through town. So I just wanted to add that to Emily's comments. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I do have a question for our attorney, Catherine Sellers, who's online. We've had a quote from Title 42-4-225 saying that it requires any vehicle equipped with engine compression brake devices to be equipped with a proper muffler. Are there technical specifications around that? I have several questions. Are there technical specifications around that requirement? Are there requirements for retrofitting to older vehicles, or is there a time cutoff? And these are questions that I don't know that we need answers tonight. If you knew off the top of your head, that'd be great, but understand you may have to do a little research to answer something like that. And if there are other parameters or things to consider in that title, be interested to hear from our attorneys on that, perhaps in a memo at some future date. But Catherine, do you have a response to that?
So on the technical specifications question, the statute does talk a little bit about what modifications aren't allowed. I wouldn't say it's very specific, but there is a little bit in there. As to it says every motor vehicle subject to registration and operation on a highway is subject to the statute. So that sounds like it's pretty big coverage, but we can take a deeper look at those questions and provide council with a probably more thorough answer than I'm giving this evening.
Thank you for that. Let's move on. We do have a lot of people to speak.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick,
Yes, thank you.
if I may, for just a moment, and perhaps Commander Sabatino can talk a little bit more about this, but, from a technical specification standpoint, the officers need to be trained on specific things on what to look for under this particular law. We have partnered with Colorado State Patrol in the past to do, vehicle stops or, specifically for 18-wheelers. But there are additional things and steps that do have to go into that. And, Commander Sabatino, I don't know if you have anything else you want to add to that.
Yeah, that's actually part of my little speech that I'm going to give in a little bit. We have an excellent partnership with the Colorado State Patrol and our troop here in Fremont County. I'm sure that they would be happy to assist us not only in an operation to do inspections on trucks coming through town with their motor vehicle carrier services unit, but also to train up our folks so we don't need their assistance when we're out on a traffic stop for something with a semi. We can do an inspection right there and technically be certified and know what we're looking at.
Do you believe, a follow-up question there, and then I'll get to Councilmember Smisher, but a follow-up question, is there a way to inspect to determine, number one, if a diesel truck has a Jake brake, and number two, whether it has a proper muffler? Is there an inspection that can happen there?
Yeah, so with the Colorado State Patrol and their motor vehicle carrier services unit, if I'm saying that long thing right, that's all they do is commercial vehicles, and they go down a checklist of things that they check, from the air brakes on the truck to the tire tread and air pressure and lights and reflectors and all of that stuff, exhaust system. So would I be able to tell you exactly what's supposed to be and how it is? Not yet, but that's why I mentioned I'm sure that they would be more than happy to, to work in partnership with us and teach us exactly what to look for.
Thank you for that. Councilmember Smisher.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I just had a question for City Administrator Stevens. I know you were planning to chat with the county about the permit for the mine to get better information on operating hours and that sort of thing, and I wasn't sure if you had had a chance to do that before this meeting or not.
Yeah, actually, I received a text just before this meeting from the county administrator. We had a discussion earlier today. They have already reached out to the mine, the new operator, reminding them of their special use permit and the hours of operation, as well as there's an additional code in their permit regarding the use of Jake brakes and the hours that those could be used. So they've reminded the mine of that. They were going to let dispatch know and make sure that information was disseminated to the truck drivers that are going up to the mine.
Thank you so much for doing that, and thank you so much for that information. That's really helpful. Do you happen to know offhand what those hours are? No worries if you don't. I just think it might be helpful for folks to know.
I do not have that information right offhand. I do have it in my email, but It's buried in about 500 pages of a special use permit document.
Understood. But that's great to hear that there are operating hours and that there are only certain hours where that type of breaking is permitted.
Councilmember Tracy.
I was just going to ask a similar question, and that is, can we get access to a copy of that special use permit so that we can, all of us, be aware of, just because that is a specific issue, obviously, for the Tunnel Drive folks, the operation of the trucking at the quarry. And so it'd help us to know what they are permitted to do and not do. And so glad that came up.
Councilmember Stein.
Yes, thank you. I was just wondering, is there a better phone number, like a dispatch number, so that they don't have to call an emergent number if there's an issue of noise in a neighborhood? Is there a number you'd prefer they call?
A non-emergent number, yeah. Everybody ready to write? 719-276-5600. And I believe the extension for dispatch is 6. And as soon as you push that, it gets you through to dispatch, and then they'll start asking you questions.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next, we have Ben Kwitek.
Good evening, everyone. So again, my name is Ben Kwitek, or Kwitek. So longtime Canyon City resident. I have a PhD and I teach entrepreneurship and innovation at the University of Colorado Springs. And I did my PhD dissertation on economic development. I mention that only to say that I think this is an economic development issue. I think the great cities of the world are places that people want to live and spend time in. And oftentimes it's hard to put your finger on what those elements are. Why are they great places? Certainly noise is one component of that. If you're trying to enjoy a coffee or a glass of wine and you're hearing all of this noise on the highway, you just, in your mind, I think, believe that it's not as great a place. Like the quality of life doesn't seem like it's there. So I think that if we're looking to grow the city and have people want to live here and have the jobs and the vitality that we're all looking for, I think having sensible noise ordinance makes all the sense in the world, because it does increase that quality of life that we all want. I mean, this is a beautiful place. Sometimes I think we take it for granted, but if you were to compare some of the vistas here to places around the world that people talk about, whether it's Geneva, Switzerland, or Aspen, I mean, we compare favorably in a lot of ways. So why not, again, have something that just makes sense so it includes, that noise ordinance so that we don't have these loud noises. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, and apologies for butchering your name there. And let me just make that a future apology. If I butcher your name, please forgive me. But Cindy Dykstra?
Good evening, everyone, and I also appreciate the opportunity to give some input on this. I live on Tunnel Drive, which may not look like it, but it is in the city limits. So I feel like sometimes we're less protected by city, not necessarily in law enforcement, but in policy-wise, because we're a short street, there's only a few of us there, and some people tend to think we're not even in the city. So the trucks coming down from the quarry have produced noise levels over 90 decibels outside of my house, keeping in mind that this is measuring with a cell phone app standing in the front of my house. So I'm sure some professional equipment would prove, would give you a more solid number. But I've heard over 92 decibels in the front of my house. I can't have a conversation with a neighbor or anyone that comes by. I can't sit in the back of my house in a hammock and read and enjoy it during the day because it goes on all day long. Each one of those will last for more than a minute, and as I said, it continues all day. The truck traffic seems to have increased dramatically as well, which is something I haven't yet heard brought up. We bought our house 25-ish years ago on Tunnel Drive, and you could put up with a little bit of truck noise. Now, it's all day, every day. From At least I hear it at 5 a.m. until whatever time they decide to close. Such levels of noise cause issues for children, that we do have children on Tunnel Drive now, all the wildlife that is at that end of our town, and the people using the wonderful trail system, whether that's biking or walking, jogging, hiking, and we want to encourage people to do those things, and it's a beautiful area, and we've done a lot of great work on the trails, and then they hear this horrible noise. It just kind of ruins the whole thing. And as to safety, since it was brought up by Mr. Maloney, there have been some safety concerns of late due to the increase in these trucks. I'm in the turning lane on the highway to turn on Tunnel Drive, and there's a truck coming and he's sitting right in the middle of that bridge, and I can't get turned off. Or if you start to turn, there's a car coming down the hill. Where are you going to go? What are you going to do? They also do not stop at the stop sign coming down from the quarry quite often. I saw a bicyclist almost hit. I've been out of town for about a month, so it was probably 5 or 6 weeks ago. But it was a pretty close call. And like I said, they're running so many trucks in and out, in and out, in and out now that an accident is bound to happen. Besides the fact that they have ruined that end of Tunnel Drive, the pavement, and the highway itself by constantly pulling in and out of there. My wish to see would be to see a different entry and exit for that quarry, not have it be on a city street, have it on the other side of the quarry or something. It would take a lot of safety issues out of the question. It would take a lot of noise issues out of the question. I don't know if that's doable, but that would be something to maybe consider by them. So, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Councilmember Schmischer.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I am wondering, I know the mine is permitted by the county, but given that it is accessed by city streets and there may be, I'm not sure, but there may be some impact to city streets, do we review it, or what sort of input or what sort of role do we have in that permitting process? Thanks.
Yeah, I don't know that I can answer that. That permit was issued many, many years ago, so I don't know what role the city played in the issuance of that permit.
Would, Catherine, would you be able to speak to that from a legal perspective? If it were a new permit that were being requested today that had an impact on city streets and city residents, what kind of role, or would the city have any review process of that?
So I'm not familiar with the county's land use regulations to be able to answer that question, but I will say that part of what cities and counties do is to create intergovernmental agreements that address that, particularly when it comes to roads and impacts, and it gives certain referral powers and review powers to the other entity who's being impacted by the project. So I don't believe we have an IGA with the county. I think we might be working on one kind of solidify that issue, but that's where I think things stand today.
And that is correct. We are working on an IGA with the county for similar type issues.
Okay, thank you.
Follow-up question there. Based on what we've heard tonight, is this something that you may contemplate adding to our IGA?
Yeah, well, we can take a look at the IGA and see how it's addressed, but specifically, it's addressing areas within our urban growth boundary and being a referral agent in those matters. So I think that would partially address this. I don't know if Catherine has any other recommendations on things we might want to add to the IGA, but that is the kind of the backbone of what the IGA is.
Thank you. Also, I would, on the issue of the quarry, I know that there were certain conditional use permits that the county looked at where enforcement had been lax over the years, and they did attempt to tighten those areas up. But if you have a concern about the quarry, hours of operation, numbers of trucks, The county also accepts a public comment before each of their meetings. I'd encourage you to go to them. It is their permit, and they are the enforcing authority on that. So that is another avenue that may be open to addressing a lot of trucks coming from the quarry. Councilmember Stein.
Thank you. I wanted to add that this early spring, when I serve on the board of the hydraulic ditch, and when that ditch runs along your neighborhood, and the day that I was walking the ditch with Mr. Colon, I observed exactly what you said was going on, and it was nonstop. We couldn't hear each other think. We had to drive to another part of town to have a conversation, and they don't stop for that stop sign. They just roll through all day long.
Thank you. Next, we turn to Catherine Seamet.
Hello, members of the City Council, and thank you for hearing our concerns. I've been a resident of Canyon City for about 8 years. I live 4 blocks south of the Riverwalk, off of First Street, and I want to let you know that I too have been woken up at 6 in the morning by the Jake brakes. And I don't consider that I live that close to 50. I guess 4 blocks is, but it really is disconcerting. I've gotten used to the 7 a.m. territorial whistle going, but earlier than that, it does irritate me. I also am here in support of my neighbors. I too have ridden horses over at my friend Brenda's house, and I've taken riding lessons with her, where we have to stop because I cannot hear. And I am paying significant amount of money for these riding lessons to be disturbed by this. I've also had a very anxious horse because of it. And it's a safety risk to me being in that neighborhood. So thank you for your concern.
Thank you. Next, we have Rita Everett.
I'm Rita Everett, and I live on Tunnel Drive for over 40 years. Yes, 40 years. And it used to be a wonderful place to live, and now it's not. My life is a misery. I live directly across from the crusher. They put in a crusher across from my house. I can't see it, but I can certainly hear it. But that's the least of my troubles. Anytime after 3 in the morning, you are apt to hear, I am apt to hear, be awakened by noise up there. And I feel like I'm going through a gauntlet when I drive to the end of Tunnel Drive. Like I'm taking my life in my hands, because those trucks are so huge and they're so continuous that you've got people coming from upriver on a major highway and people coming from town on a major highway, and we have to try and get out, and we can't see because those trucks are in our vision. We've lost a number of wildlife creatures on that street, and it's been a nightmare. It really has, for a number of months, and if not longer than that. And I do have to say that you were talking about years ago the county dealt with some of this problem, and I was much younger then, and we spent a lot of money, and we were in mediation for 2 years, and we got that road was built, that road that we're talking about now, that was built because of what some of us did and paid for. But now it's all for naught because things have changed so much, and we're dealing with such power, industrial power invading us. And I want to say one more thing, and that's back then, and there still is a road that's just upriver from the college. And that was the road, I believe, to the original quarry up there. And it does connect, my friend Brenda taught me that it does connect. She rode her horse up there in the olden days. And it does connect with the current quarry. So it seems to me a lot of problems might be improved, if not resolved, for somebody to look at the possibility of making that road the entry road. I think it would be a lot safer. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Tracy?
Thanks. I think I have 2 or 3 things, if I might, just in response to what Rita was saying and what was also said earlier. It would be great to know more about what that old road, where that old road runs to and from, and is that something that might be an option to discuss with the county. And I hope that it is appropriate to say to folks here, yeah, go talk to the county about your concerns, because the county is the one that gives the permit for that quarry. But I think we can also, on our side, at least in my opinion, I think it would be great if our city staff could make that communication also, and just let county folks know that there are these concerns that are ongoing and long-term. And then my question was, the stop sign, you're talking about the stop sign, I believe, at the bottom of the road where the trucks come down. Is that in city limits, or is that in county jurisdiction?
That should be in city limits.
Okay, so that is something that theoretically we could look at, a
Absolutely.
possible enforcement there.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
thanks.
Hang on a second, hang on to that question, don't lose it, and we'll come back to you. But first, Gary Nyans, if I pronounce that right?
Yeah, I really want to thank the council for addressing the problem so quickly. You know, we talk to Washington, they never hear anything anyone says, but you people got on it right away. And I'm here because I'm in favor of noise. You know, I don't think anyone wants noise. I don't know exactly what the consequence is if a loud motorcycle or something comes through town, but I think it's like Ben said. And you hear the people on Telegraph talking, their problem's much more severe, it sounds like, than ours at Sunrise Mesa. But it's a problem that can be remedied real easily. And these companies, we're not anti-business at all, but they can resolve this thing. And I imagine the reports the front office is getting is from the drivers are different than the drivers' behavior on the streets. Because like Tony was saying, this isn't a problem you see occasionally, it's constantly. And revisiting one other thing on Walmart. When we passed the thing where they could put all those containers outside, okay, they haven't really done that. They only have like 4 there, so that's pretty good. But I want to remind the council, the next time they come, this is a company that makes $157 billion. They make $430 million a day. They can build a structure, they can build something that doesn't look like trash in the town. And that's my point. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And next we have John Clements.
Well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for taking the time and listening to my good neighbors from Tunnel Drive. And they've expressed themselves admirably with their concerns and their opinions. So excuse me if I repeat what they said, but I'm going to say it anyway if you don't mind. My wife and I, Melody, live on Tunnel Drive, have lived there for 23 years, and we love it there. Got the finest neighbors in Canyon City, as you can see. And I'm here to talk about the noise, obviously. And a couple things that the volume of traffic has increased significantly over the last 3 months. And there was a transition in ownership from TZAC, who was an excellent neighbor to Tunnel Drive, to the Holcomb Group, who I have not spoken to. But there's been a transition. But the increase in traffic has increased significantly. There was a time when I went out and counted just the trucks going up was 50 to 60 an hour. And that varies because truckers like to get an early start in the morning. They have to haul back to their shipping place, and they come back and they make so many round trips. So in the morning is the most intense, noisiest period of the activity. Afternoons, it tapers off. Unfortunately, the morning starts about 4:30 in the morning. That's prime time for these trucks, 50 or 60 an hour going up. They got to come down, so that's 100, 120 in an hour that I counted personally. So majority of the trucks, based on my opinion, are not overly noisy, in my opinion. There's about a 30 or 1/3 of all the trucks coming down are very noisy, to the point where they rattle the windows on our house. Now, I don't have a decimal meter, and Cindy used her smartphone. I was going to ask the police department, if you're enforcing noise levels, do you have a decibel meter, and could you bring it up to Tunnel Drive and give us some actual readings on the intensity and the sound? That's because 90 decibels is a good conversation level. Anything above that could be 110, 120 is screaming. And do you have a decibel meter?
I don't, but like we were talking earlier with our exhaust brake muffler inspections that we're talking about with State Patrol, I think that would solve a lot of that problem.
Okay, well, unless you have a decibel meter in an operational situation, trucks coming down primarily, you'll never know if it's too loud. You won't have a reference or a standard to use. I mean, let's face it. If you have somebody that's breaking the law, if you have a decimal threshold, you're going to write them a ticket, right?
Sure.
So you're not going to write them a ticket just to say, well, I think you're too loud.
Absolutely not. We wouldn't do that. And this is an educated guess. I guess I'll call it educated. That during our training with the State Patrol, I would think that it would be more than just a visual inspection of, hey, this has an appropriate muffler, before the exhaust brake system or whatever. But I would think that they probably have some sort of metering system. And if they do, then we would likely adopt something like that.
But if they pull the truck over like they do, that's a static situation. That truck is not moving and the muffler is not engaged.
Right.
So it has to be measured in an operational condition.
Sure.
So that would, be a decimal meter. And I also wanted to expand on what Cindy was talking about, safety. It's at the base of that hill, going on to Highway 50, coming off Tunnel Drive, and they're coming down the quarry. That's a pinch point. I mean, there are times in the morning, there might be 2 or 3 trucks, 4 trucks lined up on Highway 50, ready to turn in. You got traffic coming down 8 Mile Hill, then you have trucks coming down the quarry, already at the stop sign, and it's a loggerhead there. And I think some of my neighbors expressed, you cannot navigate through. You can't go around trucks when they're coming and going, and they're twisted up in this small little area of probably 300 feet on the road. It's very unsafe. So that's my opinion, and I appreciate you listening to me. I hope we can do something about it. I will tell you this, for some reason, when the TZACs owned it, we didn't have as much of this problem. I think the major issue is that this new owner has attracted a lot more business, which is good for Canyon City and their business. But that may be something we could look at, is maybe redirecting the route up the hill, up 8 Mile Hill a little bit, and relieving that pressure point. Thank you very much, and thank you, sir.
Just a couple of points, and then we'll cycle back to Rita here. But the one of the issues with measuring noise levels is that noise drops off very rapidly the further away you get from the source. And so all noise level limits are based on a distance from the source. And so there's technical things that come into play. It's not just a simple number that you can easily achieve by measurement. You can certainly know if something's too loud at your house, that's for sure. But for compliance purposes, it gets a little bit more tricky, technical. The other thing that I would point out is that it may be appropriate, Mr. Administrator, for us to do a traffic count at Tunnel Drive, because one of the issues is that is a pretty scary corner. I've turned there, and it's it can be pretty concerning with the speed vehicles are traveling at that point. But the point I'm trying to make is that CDOT controls that intersection, and if there are certain engineering numbers, vehicle counts that are met in that area, it's possible that there may be that the numbers would show that a signal is required there. And so that's why I'm suggesting we do a vehicle count. And the other thing that will do for us is that when you do talk to the county about this particular situation, having some numbers in hand would certainly enhance the conversation. And Rita, did you add another comment?
I think I remember part of it anyway.
Would you step to the microphone, please? This meeting is being recorded, and I'm sure there are just thousands of people watching us here tonight. But so,
That's very helpful.
but that's the reason we ask you to come to the microphone.
Enforcement of checking all this out concerns me, and I know so little about that sort of thing, but it seems to me if there were a way to put this on camera, all the trucks, and determine by some kind of listening device which ones were breaking the rules, that would be a better way to enforce things and maybe not cost as much money until they use a different place. I think that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you for that. Councilmember Tracy.
Thanks. I wanted to make a comment kind of along the lines of enforcement, and that is, at least in my mind, if we have an ordinance that's specific to Jake breaks and just say they're not legal to use in town, we don't need to measure the level of noise, I don't think, with that. You either hear the Jake break or you don't. And so that's probably some kind of a traffic enforcement process where an officer's sitting there with his window down or whatever, and it's like, it's so obvious when they're using them. It's not like, was that a Jake break I heard? I mean, it's just, it's there or it's not. So to me, that's a simpler thing. Now, separate from that are these other more general issues about noise and whether the city wants to get in the business of having a general noise ordinance and how that would be enforced. But to me, the Jake break thing and some of these other things we're talking about, like running stop signs, we can do that. So I'll leave it at that.
And thank you for that. And I would remind us up here that what we're talking about is unmuffled Jake brakes. I have a diesel truck. It does have a Jake brake on it. It does have the appropriate mufflers on it. You can barely tell when the Jake brake is being functional. So it's not necessarily Jake brakes that is our target, it's unmuffled Jake brakes. But thank you for that, because something else to consider is that anytime that you're enforcing an ordinance that involves a measurement, that you start getting drawn into being able to prove that your measuring device is accurate. And so that you start getting into calibrations issues and things like that. And that's why perhaps our Colorado Highway Patrol would be very useful in coming into this discussion. Sure.
Why would you have a noise ordinance if you can't measure it, or the measurements aren't reliable? What's the point then?
That's a good question. And so that's part of what we're going to be wrestling with as city council members up here. If we do, if we do want to create a noise ordinance, how are we going to measure it? How are we going to enforce it? Those are questions that have to be answered so that we make sure that we're being even-handed, fair, and just in the enforcement of that ordinance. Those are good questions, and ones we're going to have to answer if we go down that road. City Administrator Stevens.
Yeah, and I was actually going to ask Catherine, could you talk a little bit about the city's ability to piggyback on the state statute and whether or not we can fine above that, that amount that's designated in Title 42?
I wouldn't recommend piggybacking on the state statute. I think you need to create your own so we can bring cases into muni court. If you want to use it as a guide, that's different, but I think you need to adopt your own ordinance.
Yeah, thank you.
Councilmember Schmischer.
Thank you. I'm curious if the city, in preparation for tonight, has done any research on what other municipalities have in terms of the noise ordinances, how they measure them, how they enforce them, what's out there, what's working, what can we learn from others as we start to think about this issue?
Councilmember Schmischer, I have a little bit of information regarding that, if I'm good to start talking. All right.
Well, so please bring it home for us, Commander Sabatino.
All right. I'd like to start with some statute stuff or some municipal code stuff, just so I can hopefully educate some of us on what we currently have. So on one of these are the closest statutes that we have right now, or the closest codes that we have in Canyon City Municipal Code in reference to noise. This first one here is called unnecessary vehicle noise. And this one does not fit, but like I say, it's kind of close, so I'm just going to read it. No person shall intentionally operate any vehicle at such a speed on a curve or turn or accelerate or decelerate such vehicle in such a manner as to create loud and unnecessary noise through the squealing of tires upon the pavement or to cause damage to the roadway. The second one that I'm going to talk about is certain noises unlawful, and this one is pretty wide open. It is unlawful for any person to make, continue, or cause to be made or continued any loud, unnecessary, or unusual noise, or any noise which either annoys, disturbs, injures, or endangers the comfort, repose, health, peace, or safety of any person within the city limits of Canyon City. So that's the closest one that we have so far. I know I kind of backed up a little bit. I will answer your question if I'm good to keep talking.
Yes, please. Thank you.
All right. So while we're talking about statute stuff, there's actually an application process for signage, and I'll talk about that in a minute. That's actually through CDOT for engine brake or that not being allowed. They actually have. I think I skipped ahead here. They actually have a noise ordinance example in the application process from CDOT. So this one I changed just a little bit just so it kind of makes sense and it fits our needs a little bit better. So their title is Use of Engine Brakes Prohibited. And again, this is just an example recommended by CDOT. Use of engine brakes prohibited. 1, prohibited use of engine brakes. The use of engine brakes shall be prohibited within the city boundaries, specifically along US Highway 50 between First Street and 15th Street. Engine brakes may be used only in emergency or life/safety situations. Such situations include pedestrians hastily entering crosswalks, cars hastily veering or stopping in front of trucks, oversized loads, and other road conditions that may create hazardous driving conditions. And then subsection 2 of that ordinance is posted signage. It states the town shall erect or cause to be erected street signage that identifies this section's requirements in the municipal code. And more to talk about with the CDOT application process in a minute with that. Now to answer your question after all of that, I apologize.
No,
A lot
no.
of information to go over all at once here. So answering the question on other agencies or municipalities' operations, this is the best that I could find. So with Castle Rock PD, for some reason I thought that I saw signage in Douglas County in reference to exhaust brakes. I was actually wrong. I'm not sure where I saw that. It wasn't with them, but I checked with them, and Castle Rock PD actually does exactly what I want to do with the Colorado State Patrol. And they actually, at least once a year, they conduct with it's actually called the Colorado State Patrol Motor Carrier Safety Section. They conduct at least one commercial motor vehicle checkpoint a year, and they're specifically looking for that statute in reference to engine brake mufflers. They do that quite often, and they plan to continue it this year with Colorado State Patrol. Talking about more about Douglas County up there. So the Douglas County Sheriff's Office, I talked with a deputy up there to see if they had a specific ordinance in reference to engine brakes, and they actually don't. The closest thing that they have is limitations on truck traffic, which prohibits heavy truck traffic in certain areas, and we actually have something to that effect in our ordinances. After a lot of Googling on the internet, I was able to find that the La Plata County Sheriff's Office actually adopted an ordinance in reference to engine brake operations, but I, for some reason, haven't actually been able to talk to anybody over the phone with them. I'm going to continue trying to get with them, but they keep forwarding me to somebody that isn't there. So more to come on that. I reached out to the Colorado State Patrol, the Pueblo Troop. I know the captain out there, and he told me that they don't enforce anything engine brake related in Pueblo, but they do, however, enforce what we talked about earlier, 42.4.225 mufflers and prevention of noise. And again, their trucks, or the trucks, the commercial trucks, are inspected by the patrol's motor carrier safety section. This was mentioned a little bit earlier with that statute, and to go just a little bit more in detail on that, subsection 1 of that statute, every motor vehicle subject to registration and operated on a highway shall at all times be equipped with an adequate muffler in constant operation and properly maintained to prevent any excessive or unusual noise, and no such muffler or exhaust system shall be equipped with a cutoff, bypass, or a similar device. No person shall modify the exhaust system of a motor vehicle in a manner which will amplify or increase the noise emitted by the motor vehicle of such vehicle above that emitted by the muffler originally installed on the vehicle. Very wordy. And such original muffler shall comply with all of the requirements of this section. I don't know if you want me to continue going through all the subsections. We've got 2 more. Are we interested in that? Or are we good just knowing that we have something related to exhaust brake mufflers and we're looking at educating our department with the State Patrol and hopefully doing some inspections? Good enough?
What about Salida? Because the trucks that are going through town, many of them may be coming from Salida and eventually they'll go through Pueblo. Others may be coming from Pueblo going to Salida.
Sure.
So, and then Penrose, I know a lot of those stone trucks That's where they go. They go up 115.
Yeah, and so Penrose has the sheriff's office, and I'm 99% sure that they don't have
They don't do
anything
any,
like
but-
that.
but I would-
Salida very
yeah.
well could.
Yeah, but Salida, I mean, do you think they have anything?
They sure could. Yeah, like you said, with the traffic up there. And I think honestly, as most of us probably know and guess, most of our traffic is just the daytime truckers that are in and out of the quarry going through town. There's a lot of over-the-road truckers that, are just passing through, but the majority of our truck traffic, I think, is probably, rock trucks and, hauling gravel and whatever else to and from the quarry all day long.
Thanks.
Thank you for that. Is that the end of your presentation then?
I don't know that I need to read all the specifics of the application process for CDOT, but actually on Colorado Department of Transportation's website, they have an application specifically for municipalities that want signage. And City Administrator Stevens and I had talked last week about this, and we were talking about
Public Works.
About Public Works maybe being involved in the application process, because they've got to do, like you had talked about earlier, the traffic count and that sort of thing, and there's some specific information that they have to fill out. But anyway, they fill out the application, we submit it to CDOT, and if it's approved, then we're approved for the signage.
Thank you for that. And I would point out that based on the information that you provided us, what the signage prohibits is that engine brake mufflers are required. And
Correct.
so it's not a prohibition on Jake brakes, it's a requirement that Jake brakes have mufflers. Councilmember Schmischer.
Thanks, and thanks so much for this presentation. It is really helpful. Also to know that there are ordinance examples out there that we could potentially modify. In your example of how we might modify it, it does kind of mention specifically Highway 50 between First Street and 15th Street. I'm assuming there's no need to limit it to that specific area, particularly since we do have so many concerns outside of that area.
Correct.
Okay.
And we had also, City Administrator Stevens and Chief Schick and I, when we met last week, we talked about kind of, throwing or bouncing ideas around as far as where to put the signage. And we were thinking from 1st to 15th would be good just to get them through the boulevard, through Royal Gorge Boulevard, because it's such a condensed area. And one of the stipulations in the application process for CDOT is that there has to be a residential area within, 1,000 feet or something like that. We figured that would be a good section to kind of limit that. Doesn't mean that just because I typed it in there, doesn't mean that we're limited to that. But if we wanted it to go further east than 15th Street, I think we need to have more signage, because if we put one at the city limits at, around First Street and Soda Point, and then one at Berta Hill, which is east of Home Depot, they're going to forget. Or, we've got trucks that are turning in and out of traffic and may not ever even see those signs. So that was just an example that I had typed in there and something that we had briefly spoke about.
Absolutely. I'm actually thinking about further west, past First Street, over by the Tunnel Drive turn, perhaps.
And
might be helpful, or by that stop sign.
Sure, and the reason why I started it at First Street just with my idea is because of the grade. And my thinking, not that I'm a professional truck driver, but one of the reasons why they use an engine brake is so it gives their normal brakes a rest. And I was thinking, if we've got trucks that are trying to slow down and keep their brakes cool before they come into town, that sounds like a pretty good idea. But we have some work to do with muffler inspections and that sort of thing. But I was thinking that, because another stipulation in the application for CDOT is that it mentions grade in there, but that's not, if we're working from 1st to 15th or further east, that's not applicable. I guess, long story short, long answer short, I was looking at it as more of a safety concern west of First Street because of the elevation, either coming out of the quarry or coming down 8 Mile. And I don't, just my point of view, I don't want them getting their actual brakes hot before they enter our city limits and then have to travel through town and stop and go and stop and go.
Sure. I'm also really interested in kind of the broader Colorado Revised Statute, Title 42, that you read the first subsection of, because that covers so much more than just Jake brakes and mufflers on that. It's really all mufflers. And that, I think, is touching on what Council Member Stein and I were talking about at the beginning of the meeting. I'm not sure if we would need to incorporate some of that kind of language into our city ordinance as well, or given that, and this may be a question for you, Catherine, or given that it's in the CRS, it's just a matter of enforcement. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry. It depends on where you want to bring the case. If you want to bring the case into Muni Court, then you need to establish a municipal ordinance to do that. Otherwise, it's going to probably go into county court.
I mean, I think my issue is really about enforcing it, because I think right now we are not. And I guess I would love to hear more about, other than just the potential partnership with the Colorado State Patrol on muffler inspections. Do you see any ways that we could feasibly enforce kind of the broader muffler CRS? Thanks.
If I could, there we go. Turn it back on. So as mentioned before, you know, us just having an officer sit on the side of the road, it's very easy to determine whether or not a truck's engine brake is activated or not. So that's easy.
Sorry, I'm not necessarily in this instance talking about the Jake brakes. I'm talking about the other muffler issues that we have in town.
Yeah, and that would be, you know, something that, I mean, in certain noises unlawful, it's pretty open that, you know, as far as causing to be made any loud, unnecessary, unusual noise, or any noise which either annoys, disturbs, injures, or endangers the comfort. So that's, again, we're kind of shifting to municipal code. As far as the other statute, and this isn't the full statute, the 42 code statute is not the full one that's in the blue book, in the Colorado statute book. It's just an excerpt from that specifically mentions commercial vehicles. So there, like I mentioned earlier, there's something in there, some verbiage of a person shall not modify the exhaust at all, or something to that effect. And, you know, a reasonable officer or a reasonable person that sees a vehicle that's, you know, extremely loud, like we were talking about the 92 Honda Civic with the, you know, straight pipes out the back or whatever, that would be an obvious thing for a reasonable person, a reasonable officer, to be able to make contact and enforce, you know, that specific statute.
So my question is, right now, it doesn't appear that we're enforcing either the statute that we have or the CRS statute. So I'm wondering if the police department can reasonably enforce section 9-28080, and if there's a reason why we're not currently doing it, if you don't have the tools that you need to be able to enforce it, or kind of what we can do to help rein in some of the noise trouble that we have in our town.
So we are utilizing that statute. Not necessarily in that specific instance, but that's, I hate to call it a catch-all for noise, but it technically is, you know, with like Sterling was talking about, you know, with the loud music and the partying, and even, you know, somebody at 3 o'clock in the morning that's out drinking beer, running a skill saw, building their deck. I mean, you know, that's why I'm calling it like a catch-all statute. I was actually on a traffic stop last night. I was covering patrol, and one of our detectives made contact with a teenager in a big, loud Ford Power Stroke pickup that's lifted up and had obvious aftermarket exhaust, blowing black smoke and super loud, and he pulled him over for that specific 42 code. So we are using it. But in reference to commercial vehicles, we're not yet.
The Councilmember Worthington, did you have a comment?
It was covered.
Thank you. I would like to just point out that if we're going to be talking about modifications to mufflers, it was kind of my previous question. Was there a time limit on that? I mean, cars manufactured after a certain year prohibited changing muffled exhaust. because we do have a quite large car community in town that have some heavily modified older vehicles. We do have a car show at the Abbey, and if we were enforcing no changes to mufflers, pretty quick we would not have a car show at the Abbey. But that's just something for us to consider. Councilmember Stein.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, and either you or Ryan can speak to this. Have we talked to Judge Allen about this, our municipal court judge? That's where the buck stops with this stuff. And for us to use our valuable police time to give out citations using that ordinance, if it's not, if when it gets to Judge Allen, it's not something that hasn't the teeth, and Catherine, you probably are, you know what I'm talking about. It's just that we don't want to spin our wheels with something that when he gets it, he really can't, he doesn't have enough, someone can have an attorney that says, oh, well, you're not specific enough, and how, what exactly, and what, you don't know what the decibels were, that kind of thing. Thank you.
Sure. And I think that's something that, as we move forward with this stuff, that we become more educated on it and figure out exactly what we need to prosecute those types of cases in municipal court. We can get with Tricia McCarthy and Judge Allen and figure out all of that stuff. I think that's just part of the process and some of the puzzle pieces.
Attorney Sellers, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I did. So I think engaging Tricia is a really good idea. She does quite a bit of this type of prosecution. My concern with Judge Allen is the separation of powers. He's an enforcement mechanism in the city. If he gets involved in the legislative process, that often makes municipal judges very uncomfortable. So I think we need to approach that with some caution, and I don't want to put him in a spot where he feels like he is doing something he shouldn't be.
But the appropriate person to approach would be our prosecutor, and that is someone that we can have those discussions with.
Absolutely.
Mr. Hamrick?
Yes.
May I have 1 minute, please?
Sure. And I'm just about to turn to the audience again for the comment.
We've been focusing on noise and traffic flow and trucks, and I think we may have glossed over the most concerning issue, and that's general public safety. And I'm referring to Tunnel Drive is not just an asphalt street, it's also one of the most popular walking trails in Canyon City, in my opinion. And I kind of described this pinch point of the trucks and the turns off. Well, right in the middle of that pinch point, where Highway 50 and it turns onto Tunnel Drive, and these trucks are all backed up and they're gnarling their way up and down, there's a pedestrian walkway right there. And I'm telling you, honest to goodness, there's got to be a couple hundred people a day on a weekday using that trail, walking across that pedestrian walkway. Now, weekends, it's a lot more than that. So we have a general public safety issue I think is probably more important than Jake breaks and traffic flow. That's something we should seriously be looking at. Thank you.
A question there before you sit down again, John. But is that are you talking about a crosswalk there?
Yeah,
is that
pedestrian crosswalk.
Crosswalk.
It's right in the middle of that congested pinch point where all those trucks are navigating and jockeying for position to get up and down the quarry.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification.
As somebody who frequents Tunnel Drive quite often, the connection from the Riverwalk to Tunnel Drive, there's a crosswalk where you cross that street right there where that intersection occurs. And I would agree with you, as somebody who's been on all of the trails in our community, Tunnel Drive is by far the most populated.
Councilmember Maloney.
Hi, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Are we getting a little off track here? Tonight we're talking about a noise ordinance, we're talking about engine brakes in particular. Can we agree that we do need to put in the application for the signs within at least the boundaries that Commander Sabatino said for the, what am I looking for? Engine brake mufflers required in between those points? Can we agree that that is something that we will accomplish tonight?
So I think the way that we would approach that is that this is a body or a meeting at which we're not making decisions per se as like a specific language for ordinances, but we can give direction to staff, and that is something that we can do towards the end of this meeting. I'd like to recap a little bit first, and then get to the question, the specific question that you asked there. So we've heard from several residents. Yes, sir. You
I'd like to have another minute or so. You'd ask if anyone had their commercial driver's license, I think. Well, I ran a company, I was president of a company, we had over 7,000 trucks. And we weren't in the trucking business, but we had one of the largest fleets in the U.S. And we owned all those trucks, so we were responsible for them. And you're right, there's a difference between an engine braking device, compression device, and a Jake brake. So I think what you'll find is it was sort of inconsistent. Some of them were quiet, some weren't. I think you're going to find the ones that aren't are owner-operators, where they've got the trucks, they're running them themselves, and those are the ones that are having issues. Another point is, and I think it was addressed, was in that statute, it covers all those vehicles, not just trucks. So,
Thank you.
oh, and don't forget about the east side towards Home Depot too. I know the west is important. We're talking Tunnel Drive, but it's the same thing on the other side.
Thank you for that. So to recap a little bit, we've heard a lot from residents around Tunnel Drive, different issues there, noise issues, number of truck issues. There's some information we need to develop to further understand that ourselves, exactly what what the boundaries are of the current situation. We've heard some concern about the train horns, and that is certainly something I think that we can, on an informal level, speak to those involved. And we've heard about noise ordinance, and we've looked at our own ordinances that we have on our books right now. We've looked at the possibility of creating more. And the purpose of this Vision Committee meeting was to discuss the noise ordinance, but I think to put the point on it, as Councilmember Maloney rightly points out, I think the specific question that we could perhaps give a direction to staff on is whether we are interested as a council to pursue a noise ordinance or an application, a warrant is what CDOT calls it, with CDOT to be able to install engine brake mufflers required along Highway 50, which is their jurisdiction. Councilmember Tracy.
I want to be sure that I'm understanding the material, and this one handout from CDOT was one I stumbled on also online today. And if I'm understanding correctly, these signs that are shown in here that just say engine brake mufflers required are reflecting what's already in state law. And it's just saying you as a community with the proper process can install these signs in certain places. But that if we decide to have a local ordinance that is like that sample one, the noise ordinance example, then we could add language such as they show here in the brochure, noise ordinance enforced. And that would be in addition to the signs that are reflecting what's already in state law.
Yeah,
I don't know if I said
absolutely.
that clearly enough, but
Yep.
is that how that works?
Yep, that's my understanding of it.
Yeah.
And then we keep talking about Jake brakes, and they mentioned somewhere either in the packet or on the website that, that is actually a brand name, so we wouldn't have that on, there'd be a copyright issue, so it'd have to just be engine brakes. Yeah.
Got it.
I think the difference that and where staff needs direction is if we're going to create our own engine muffler ordinance, we need to know if council wants us to do that on top of what the state already has, and then when we apply for that for the signage, we would reference the ordinance number rather than the revised statute.
And then that would allow us to do this additional sign what they refer to as R52-9A, which I think then references that there is a local ordinance that's also being enforced. CDOT doesn't make this 100% simple to follow.
I would suggest it also has a dollar amount attached to it. That was the advice I got from my CDL driver friend. Exactly.
Okay, so to give guidance to staff, we need to speak. And so, Councilmember Worthington, what are your thoughts here this evening?
Well, I definitely agree that we need to enforce the muffled mufflers. And I also think, I'm not sure, I'm still a little confused as far as, I do also agree that we need to have a noise ordinance that is beyond the 18-wheelers, so to speak, because we do need enforcement of that, and we need to have, the carrot and the stick. We need to have the stick part of that. I am confused as to why we need to have something more personal, or as far as city-wise, as opposed as to what CDOT has, or can we do a separate noise ordinance that is doing everything beyond what we're talking about with the Jake brakes? Does that make sense? In other words, I guess I'm confused as to why we need to have a second city ordinance to reinforce the state ordinance. That's where I get confused.
I think you've got two issues. If you have the city ordinance, you can go above the $500 fine if you want to set the fine limit higher.
Okay.
As Catherine mentioned, if it's a city ordinance, it goes to our municipal court rather than to the county court.
I wondered also, and I'm not an attorney, but I wondered also if the wording of the state statute seems to say, hey, you've got to be equipped with this. And I didn't know if a local ordinance would say something a little bit more precise than that. Maybe Catherine can address that.
We don't have to use that language. We can be more precise. Your home rule, so we can definitely look at that and wordsmith it to your liking.
Thanks.
And I have no problem with going above the $500 because I think these trucks make a pretty good living, and it will also enforce to the most owners who may already have the muffled brakes. That's great, but it definitely will set a tone for the independent operators also that they need to follow through.
So to summarize, just to make sure I understand what you're saying, that you're in favor with applying to CDOT to make sure that all, let's see, let me get the exact language here, that engine brake mufflers are required.
Correct.
Along Highway 50 as it travels through our town, and that you're interested also in a further ordinance by the city increasing the fine and looking at other noise issues. Would that be fair?
That is fair. And I also think, make sure that we emphasize signage and whatever we need to do along Tunnel Drive to hit that right on the nail right there, because that's where we have the biggest issue before they get onto the highway. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Tracy.
I agree with all of that and would just add that I would like the city to, in whatever channel is appropriate, I'd love for city staff to communicate with the county about the concerns about the quarry trucks and, whether that's, the hours of operation, the noise level. And I would like us, if it's within the city's powers, to enforce the stop sign, that they're apparently not always following the direction there. I'd like us to see what we can do to enforce that. And if there's a way to explore what that previous old road is that we've heard about, if that could be just at least, and I don't know if that's something that needs to be done in conjunction with the county or how, but, so I'm sort of all of the above, yes. Just let's do it.
Councilmember Maloney.
Yeah, I'm in favor of what we're talking about, except doing a separate ordinance increasing the fine. Let's just go with what works across the state. We don't need to, we're not better than anyone else. We don't need to charge $1,000 if you don't use your engine brake muffler. You know, let's stick with the 500 if that's what's common. Other than that, yeah, I'm in favor of all of that. Well, a lot of times the drivers are paying this fine. The companies are not paying it. So, I mean, your average truck driver working for rock hauling company paying $1,000 is pretty severe.
Thank you for that. Councilmember Stein.
Thank you. I'm going to give a public service announcement here for truckers. I am a third-generation trucker. I drove semis when I was between semesters in college for my dad. My dad was an independent trucker. And my son was a trucker here in Colorado for many years. And here's what we need to understand. I'm just going to take a few seconds here. Everything that you're wearing, that you eat at night when you go out to a restaurant, it came here on a truck, okay? These guys, they're hardworking. Some of them are a pain, and I know some of them are my relatives. They're a pain. And so, but we do need to remember, kind of when you see them and you think, well, you know, why are they in my way? They don't have a lot of choice in these little mountain towns when they're delivering to restaurants, to grocery stores. I mean, if they're not going to Walmart or somewhere like that, they have a lot of maneuvering to do. So I think that we need to move ahead with our own ordinance, definitely. The most calls I ever get are about noise problems in my part of town. So I think we definitely need that. Otherwise, we need to support our police department, whatever they need to do that, so that when it gets to our prosecutor, that she's got what she needs. You know, if we just have something with no teeth, and we can't prove, you know, how we decided that that was you know, obnoxious noise, then we've got to be really specific about that and figure out how we're going to prove that in a court of law. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councilmember Schmisler.
Yes, so Tunnel Drive first, mostly echoing what Councilwoman Tracy has already said, but I think these are city residents. We need to be engaging with the county on their behalf to ensure that their concerns are met for the piece that is the county's permit process, and I appreciate that you've already started that process and just would like to see that continue and kind of all of the possible avenues explored. Would love to see police at the Tunnel Drive intersection to kind of get that real-time data and kind of the hard numbers and see what needs to be done to ensure that, you know, public safety is protected there. In terms of the noise ordinances, I agree. I mean, it sounds like we have some local ordinances on the books that may be applicable, but I don't think that they are. I don't think that they're really being fully enforced, or that they really have the teeth or maybe the resources that you need to make sure that people are actually abiding by them. And I entirely agree. You want to have a town that you want to live in, and it's a quality of life issue, and we need to make sure that that folks aren't impacting other people's quality of life. So if that requires a local ordinance to get that done, then I'm in favor of that. I really appreciate the work that you've already done, talking to other communities about the Colorado State Patrol Partnership and kind of that avenue, and it sounds great in terms of the commercial vehicle inspections. And I'm in favor of the signs. I would want to see them much broader than 1st to 15th, given that we've heard concerns kind of down by the Home Depot Walmart side of town, as well as concerns past First Street. I think all of town is pretty flat, so I don't think that there would be a safety issue necessarily. However, pretty quickly after town, obviously there is that concern, but would want to see them, you know, not limited to just the 15 blocks that get the most attention. So thanks.
Thank you. And I think that staff has fairly clear direction. There may be some debate that we need to have as council members as we go through this process, but I welcome that, and I welcome you all to come back. That this sounds like it is coming to a regular city meeting council calendar at some point in the future, and there may even be process in between now and then. So stay tuned and make sure you watch our website for announcements about subjects and meetings and things like that. And if there, you do feel that you have a direction?
Yeah, yes, I do. And this will come to a committee meeting before it goes to a regular city
Yes.
council meeting.
Correct. Councilmember Tracy.
I just wanted to say a little bit more about the pedestrian safety issue, that issue has come up because of what's being done on Highway 50 now, the medians, the new crosswalks that are the controlled, I don't know the proper word, for the new pedestrian crosswalks that are going to go in several places between 1st and 15th. And so I think if we think of that, pedestrian safety issue is kind of a bigger overall umbrella at the Tunnel Drive area, along the new design for Highway 50. We don't want anyone running for their lives across Tunnel Drive or across Highway 50 in any location. That we've just got to put a bigger focus on safety, I think, and that's part of quality of life in the community too. That we, and we're working on a multimodal transportation plan. So we really want to make sure that we're addressing noise issues, safety issues for pedestrians, and look at all the places where that applies.
Thank you. Any further comment from council? Sure.
It's wonderful to see so many people here tonight, and I'm curious as to how you found out about this meeting. If it was Facebook, can you raise your hand? Nope. Oh, you know. Okay. Do you mind coming up to the mic just in case folks are listening online so they can hear you too? Thank you so much.
Well, the people that came with me, it all started with this woman right here, Kat, who told me that there was this vision meeting that she had seen online. Was it this website, the city website? So then I got together with my neighbors, and we had a couple meetings with some glasses of wine, and we inspired each other. And then I just called a few more of my friends to come support.
Thank you. That's really helpful to know how people find out about what we're talking about. And again, it's wonderful to see you all here, and it's so great to have the kind of real-time input as to what you're facing in your daily life. So thank you for coming.
I'd like to second that, and thank you for your participation. And with that, I think we're adjourned.